could be 100 or 200 miles an hour to get us through it. But when you go down now, my gosh, the amount of construction in rural Georgia on both sides of this interstate headed from Macon to Savannah in places that haven't seen industry like this. It's thriving, it's growing. My city is Macon in the middle of the state, and we have this never-ending road construction project that started when I was on city council a decade ago. And it hasn't stopped yet because they're expecting so much industry between Macon and Savannah where there's literally nothing right now. They have to expand the interstate to prepare for it, and it won't stop being built. My kid will be like an old woman with grandkids before they finish this thing. But it's because of the amazing economic progress that has been sparked by the present governor of the state of Georgia, my friend Brian Kemp.
Thank you. How are you? You said that.
Let me just start with this part because we took the kids to Hilton Head a while back. The amount of construction between Macon and Savannah is, I hadn't been down there in a while. You get down towards Bryan County now and the big facility they're building for Hyundai. I mean, it's just places that haven't had economic industry. Wilkinson County has his new projects, which is so rural. I mean, it really is amazing.
You were doing such a good job of that intro. I thought about not coming out, let you just keep talking about my record. But thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here and host with you. And it is incredible. And it's not just happening on I-16 in rural Georgia. I mean, we have an incredible amount of projects going on in southwest Georgia, which if you really look at the map and a lot of the counties that are there, some of those are the most poorest counties in the country, not just in the state, but in the country. And we've got great opportunity going in down there. I was talking with a car dealer out of Chattanooga last night, and he was talking about how really Chattanooga, and they say it's like North Georgia now there, because we're having so much growth in northwest Georgia, just with great manufacturing jobs that are paying well above the existing county wage. And it's really giving people wealth and opportunity, which, as you know, they need in today's world of fighting Joe Biden's 40-year high inflation.
True. All right, I got to completely on a random tangent because I'm looking at your boots. You know, when my mother-in-law was here a couple of years ago and you were here, she said she liked you because your boots had scuffs. They were authentic.
Well, these definitely have scuffs on them. Thankfully, we had a groundbreaking yesterday up in Gainesville, which again, outside kind of the metro Atlanta area for Kubota Tractor. They're going to be building all their front-end loaders at that new facility. It's like the number of employees that they've increased since they came here in like 1970 something is 8,900%. They employ over 3,000 Georgians now. They started with 40 or 50. They've done multiple expansions up there, and this is another $100 million plus project, several hundred jobs up in Gainesville and Hall County. And so I hadn't really had time to get my boots back in good order since we did that yesterday.
Now look, this reminds me, Rick Perry one time told me that you can always judge a man by his boots. If they look like they hadn't been worn in, you know they're not authentic.
Well, I called a lot of, you remember when I went to Davos, I called a lot of flack from people on the right because they thought I was going to get corrupted by George Soros or Al Gore or John Kerry or something. And I told people, after all I've been through and as strong a stances I've taken for conservative causes, I don't think I'm going to get corrupted by any of those people. And so the greatest first lady in the country who's here today, Marty Kemp right there, We go to Davos, it's snow and it's wet, it's icy, and they're like, you cannot wear those cowboy boots, like it's slick, you're going to fall. I said, no, I have got to wear these cowboy boots. And thankfully the first article was written when I was on the stage with Joe Manchin, Senator Chris Coons, and Christine Sinema, where I was criticizing the so-called Inflation Reduction Act and their do-nothing immigration policies at the southern border and a lot of other things. In the minute and 38 seconds that I got to talk on the panel with those federal politicians, at a 45-minute panel, I only got to talk for a minute and 38 seconds. I know that doesn't surprise y'all, nothing against my friends that are federal politicians, but you know how they are. But the first article written after that was, that I was wearing my cowboy boots in Davos. So I thought that was, really told the story in a lot of ways.
It did. All right. I have said I'm not going to talk a lot about this because I think I'm doing a disservice to the presidential candidates, but you are the governor of the state. We're in the county where the state prosecutor has decided to indict the former president. And I figure being the governor of the state, I should probably get your take on that.
I can't really comment on the indictment. If you remember kind of through the process, during the whole 2020 election, there was a lot of things said, a lot of things done. At the end of the day, I followed the law and the Constitution. I was subpoenaed for the special grand jury, so, I'm sure I will be a witness in whatever goes forward, so I really can't say much about the indictment. But regardless of what you think about the indictment, when I came out, I guess it was 2 days ago now, and tweeted the election wasn't stolen here and that we need to stay focused on the future. One thing is certain about these indictments, in my mind, in my opinion, this trial, despite what dates anybody's asking for or anything else, it is not going to happen before the election. And the Democrats want us to be focused on things like this. So we're not focused on Joe Biden's record. And I brought my little prop today. So it's a number 2 yellow pencil with an eraser. And if you do not win, you do not get to hold a pencil. And right now, Biden's holding the pencil. They're holding the pencil for the regulatory environment, whether it's at the Federal Trade Commission, at EPA, at the Justice Department, at the FBI, and they are pencil whipping the American people right now. And we have to stay focused on winning the pencil back, because then we can use the eraser to get rid of all the bad things. But really, you get to put the eraser to all the bad things that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democrats have done in Washington, D.C., and really get back to focusing on things that we know that we can change so very quickly with the right person in the White House, securing the border, restoring our military to where it needs to be, not picking winners and losers with the Inflation Reduction Act, getting our federal spending under control, just all these, dealing with 40-year high inflation, all these things that just frustrate people. It's insanity that we're having to deal with this. It should be such an easy path for us to win the White House back. But if we are looking in the rearview mirror, and this is what my message has been to every candidate in the race, including former President Trump, and I first said this in Nashville at the RNC donor retreat, is we have to be focused on the future, not something that happened 3 years ago. We don't need to be focusing on stupid things that aren't going to happen before this election. We can deal with that later, after we win. We have to tell people what we are for. And then we have to have a candidate that can win the election, because if we don't win, we don't get to govern and we don't get the pencil. I mean, it's that simple to me.
Amen to that. So you got the pencil in the state of Georgia, and I try to explain to people, particularly in light of the calls here, well, you should just pardon the former president, and explain to people our Constitution doesn't work that way in the state. Every Constitution's differently. Yeah. One of the things that you get to do as governor is, it strikes me as, while you're constrained in so many areas under the state constitution, economically you got a lot of power to woo businesses and bring businesses into the state, but also to try to grow the existing businesses in the state, which I've always, and I've told you this privately, I've admired your recognition that in the past we had a lot of governors luring in massive corporations at the expense of existing business in the state. And you really have done a really good job of looking at our industries that are already here and what can we do to grow them, and putting your administration to that.
Well, that was really what was so great about the Kubota ribbon cutting, or the groundbreaking we did yesterday, or 2 days ago, I guess it was, is that was an existing business. And they like the environment here so much, they just decided to expand here versus, looking at other places or moving or going to other states or doing it overseas. And that's, a vast majority of our projects last year. We had despite the headwinds that we have economically right now, we had another record year in Georgia last year. The State Department of Economic Development was involved in 426 projects last year. So, I don't know how many weekdays there are in a work week in a year, but you think about 365 days in a year, we announced 426 projects. So that's, over one a day, which is incredible. And they were going all over the country. All over the state. And a lot of them were existing businesses. And look, this is what you're seeing with people that win the election, like the Republican governors have in the South. We've been able to govern. We're competing against each other. Several weeks ago, it was announced that the GDP in the South had outpaced the GDP in the Northeast for the first time ever. There is a reason for that. It's because we're governing, because we have good business policies, because people want to move here where they can, experience liberty and freedom, and they have political leaders and governors and legislators that are fighting for their kids to be in the classroom when you have other states that are locking them down and keeping them out during COVID a year longer than us, not having them indoctrinated when they're in the classroom, doing something about crime, doing something about gangs. And no one's done more in the country at the state level working with our legislators than Marty Kemp in ending human trafficking in our state and helping the victims. All those kind of things we're able to do because we won, because we have majorities, and because we can govern.
I want to actually ask you about the First Lady and human trafficking, because it's one of those stories that increasingly now, as people on our side focus on it, people on the other side, well, it's not really a big issue. Yet when I was on city council in Macon, we would raid businesses in Macon and find clearly the conditions of women who were trafficked. We've had these raids in the metro Atlanta area where kids, some of whom had been kidnapped in this country, some brought into this country, had been involved in, forced into human trafficking. Congressman Chip Roy from Texas tells me just a couple of months ago on the border, they pulled over a truck and it was an American working for the cartels smuggling people over who thought they were coming here to be housekeepers, and they were being diverted into sex trafficking. It continues to be this massive issue. The First Lady has raised awareness in the state. You've been fighting for it, and yet there does seem to be this level of dismissive. But I've noticed you've been able to build a